Is your PS5 water cooled? Something we've talked about a lot here on the channel so far is that the PS5 is one chonky console. The main reason is that Sony really wanted to keep this thing cool. So instead of using two small fans, one that pulls air in and one that pushes air out, they just put one 120mm fan right on the side of this thing that just shoots air onto the motherboard and keeps it cool. And to their credit, it seems like the system is working. But it could be better. You might have seen this news floating around over the weekend, but if you missed it, there's a hardware modder over in Vietnam with a YouTube channel called Modding Cafe. They've taken their PS5 and completely deconstructed it and then rebuilt it to have one cool feature. It's water cooled now. If you haven't seen the full video yet, after you're done watching this one, I highly recommend you go check it out, because not only is it completely subtitled on the screen in English, it's also really interesting. But the coolest thing is, if you want to water cool your PS5 yourself, it kind of works as its own tutorial because they go pretty in depth. But why would you even want to water cool your PS5? Well, for one thing, it's a whole lot quieter. I'll be talking about this a lot more in a video later this week, so make sure you're subscribed with your notifications set to all. But no matter what PS5 you get, whether it's the disk drive one or the digital one, Sony actually is using two different fans in the console. One has 17 blades and one has 23. Now they're both 120mm fans, but the big difference is if you have the 17 bladed fan, it has to spin just a little bit faster to keep your console as cool as the 23 bladed fan does. And when you spin the fan faster, the console gets louder. Now Sony also built in this feature into the PS5 that makes it so with software updates, they can unlock the ability for the fan to spin faster. And the reason for that is as time goes on, games are going to get more advanced, so the fan is going to have to spin a lot faster to keep the console cool, and if the fan spins faster, the console gets louder. You can mitigate all of that by just water cooling your PS5. If you're part of the PC gaming ecosystem, water cooling is nothing new, but if you've only ever been on the console side, I'm pretty sure there isn't a single mass market console out there that's ever really employed a true water cooling technique to make their console stay cool. Basically, all water cooling is a system you can use instead of a bunch of fans that will take cool water over the hottest parts of your PC, namely the CPU or the GPU. And as that water travels over the hotter parts of your PC and sucks up the heat, it needs to be cooled again. So then it travels to a radiator, which has a fan connected to it that blasts all the hot air out of your computer. And again, it's way quieter than using a bunch of fans. And naturally, as that water sucks the heat out of the hotter parts of your PC, it needs to be cool again so that the cycle can repeat. So then it heads to a radiator. The heat is then pulled out of that radiator and blasted out of your computer with a much quieter fan than what you'd see in a PC that's not water cooled. And you can really get as in depth with this as you want. You can buy water cooling systems that just cool your CPU. You can buy some that are just GPUs with the water cooling system already built in. There's also whole PC versions that have their own little motor that carry the liquid throughout your entire PC and then again to a radiator. And those ones get crazy. You can have RGB in them, you can change the color of the liquid, you can really go nuts with customizing your PC with water cooling. On the console side of things, there's a couple reasons we haven't seen this technique being used a lot. The first one is that when you have a mass market product that millions and millions of people are going to buy, more parts equals more problems. If I'm Sony and I'm building the PS5 and I have the option to use water cooling or a big ass fan, the reason I'm going with the fan is because it's one part that's super simple to fix if it breaks down. Water cooling, on the other hand, is a lot more complicated. And the second reason you don't usually see it in consoles is that it's expensive. When you're making a console, the middle ground you're always trying to achieve is highest performance at lowest price. So when you're looking at water coolers versus a fan, water coolers are not only more expensive to produce, they're also more expensive to fix. So that's why it's pretty much a no-brainer to always go with a big ass fan. Going back to this Modding Cafe video though, the most baffling thing about it is that it looks like they could have actually made the PS5 a lot smaller than it originally was, but they put these huge metal plates on the side of it that make it the same size as the current PS5 we all have now. I really hope they take that into consideration with future models of this thing, because the idea of being able to send in my launch PS5, have it completely reconstructed to not only be a lot smaller, but also be a lot quieter because of water cooling, that's something I might actually consider doing. I'm sure it would be really expensive, but the PS5 is huge. It's hard to find an entertainment entertainment center it actually fits in. So if I can make it smaller and quieter, that's a win for me. But the idea of sending it all the way to Vietnam and waiting a few weeks, potentially up to a month, only for it to come back and have a slightly different chassis and also be water cooled, that doesn't really seem like the greatest idea in the world to me. And I think that's kind of a fair criticism. But thankfully, after watching the entire video, it actually doesn't seem like they're stopping with the brand new chassis and water cooling. It really seems like their ultimate goal is to build this thing into a PC case and keep it cool enough that it can run in the PC case alongside an actual gaming PC. Now I have to admit, I was a little confused as to why anyone would want to smash together a PS5 and a PC into the same case. But as I was Googling around, I found out this has been done before, not only fairly recently, but by a high profile company. So Origin PC, who's one of the bigger pre-built companies out there, have a model called the Big O. Cringy name aside, this thing is pretty dope. So on one side of the case, you would have a really beefy PC, and on the other side, you would have either a deconstructed PS4 Pro or Xbox One X. And connecting these two devices would be an Elgato capture card. And of course, because this was built from the ground up, the PC case it all shipped in was pretty awesome. It had water cooling all throughout the entire thing. It had RGB everywhere. It had separate power buttons, separate HDMI ports. Pretty much anything you could ever need for a setup like this was built into the PC. And that's pretty awesome. You're probably sitting there thinking, why would anyone ever want to have something like this when you could just buy a PC, a PS4 Pro, and a capture card and keep them all separate? But having it all together is the most convenient way possible to capture gameplay or stream. If all you have to do is have two separate monitors, with one monitor having the PS4 Pro's output and the other monitor having your PC's output, you could just have it all condensed and know what you're recording and know what you're streaming. Right now, if you want to stream, you need all three devices. You might even need a separate streaming PC, especially if you're playing on PC, but if you just want to play PC games, turn on the PC side, stream from there. If you want to play PS4 Pro games and not stream, all you have to do is hit the PS4 Pro power button and you're good to go. And again, the entire thing is water cooled, which makes it pretty damn awesome, if you ask me. I know the Big O had some problems once it actually started shipping, but just looking at how well the modding cafe was able to break down and rebuild the PS5, I think they could probably figure this out and make it look really cool. Another thing I'd honestly love to see from them is just a smaller chassis overall for the PS5, because they went through all the trouble to make this thing water cooled. Why not take it just one step further and make it so much smaller? If they could get this thing down to the size of a launch PS4 or maybe even the PS4 Slim well before Sony releases a PS5 Slim, that might be something that I'd consider looking into. And looking at all of this customization going on, it's hard to imagine why Sony isn't starting to think about getting into this themselves. We've had this guy who's repainting them black to look more like a PS2, and that looks amazing. We also have Dbrand who's doing their own custom faceplates, which look awesome. And now we have people deconstructing the thing and rebuilding it in a more efficient way. And that's also very cool. Like we all know, Sony is really good at making awesome custom consoles, and we'll probably see some PS5s down the line. But in my mind, if a new game is coming out like God of War Ragnarok, I think it would be sweet if they released limited edition plates that you can put on the side of your PS5. The Xbox 360 tried that and it never really got off the ground, but the PS5 is such an interesting looking machine, and it's so easy to take those plates off that it's actually something I'd really want to see. Anyway guys, that's all I have for you today. Make sure you let me know what you think down in the comments below. Especially let me know if you're one of the people who would send your PS5 to Vietnam to get it water cooled, because I'd like to hear some justification for that. And remember, if you want to stay PS ready, the best way you can do it is hit the subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Anyway guys, my name is Jimmy Champagne, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.